The app you're looking at was built with Django, and this is the app that we're going to build together from scratch using the Django Web Framework. So if you follow the previous app where we use Flask, you saw that we built this application form. So it was identical with what you're seeing now, but in addition, this time with Django we will add two things. One is this navigation bar here. So we'll have multiple pages in the app, plus this time we're gonna have an admin interface. So this one here where the admins can log in and they can see the submitted data, because this is a user interface where the visitors enter data and they press submit, and then you as an admin or someone else in your team can go to this URL, they can log in and they can access all the submitted data. So the usernames, surnames, email addresses, the available date, and the occupation. And in this interface, you can also filter the data based on certain criteria here. So we will build this interface also with Django. Yes, so ready? Let's start everything from scratch, and this will give you a very strong skill set when it comes to building applications with Django. So let's begin. I'll see you in the next video. Hey, welcome back. In this video we will set up our Django project. But before that you need to create a new PyCharm project. I've done that already, so that's my PyCharm project. I don't have any files for now, except of the venv directory, which was created by PyCharm. So let's set up a Django project. Now, with Flask, you don't really need to set up a Flask project, but with Django, things work a bit differently. So with Flask, what we do is we create a new Python file and start coding in that file. With Django, you don't create those files yourself. Django will create it for you. But first of all, we need to install Django. So that's the very first step. So please go to the terminal. So my venv is activated. So I can just run pip install Django and press enter. Right, my Django was installed successfully. So I can close the terminal. And now we want to set up the Django project. So we have the PyCharm directory here, we have Django installed. Let's set up the project. To set up the project, again, you want to go to the terminal and type in Django minus admin start project my site dot. And what is this command? Well, Django admin, Django minus admin, is one of the Django commands, so your operating system should recognize this now, because when we install Django, this was added to the path of our operating system. So you can access this command from your operating system terminal. And then this is part of this command, so we want to set up a project. So these are the commands, and this is a name you want to give to your project. So I do recommend to just write my site, and then the dot means that my site, this directory, will be created in the current directory, which is app17 Django form in my case, so the root directory of our project. So my site will be created when I run this command. Let's see. So I just ran it, and perhaps you need some seconds for this to refresh the directory, or you can go and reload from disk to refresh it. So there we go, that's my site directory, and this directory has a few .py files inside. Also outside my site, so still in app17 Django form, we also have manage.py. So what are these files? Well, some of these are configuration files, and you shouldn't change them. So please just view them. You can double click and look at what they are, but don't change anything. We will need to change some of the configurations, but I'll tell you what exactly, and I'll explain why we changed that so that you know what you're doing. So for now, please don't change them. So this here, and also manage.py. Right. Now what we did so far is we created a project. So this is known as Django project in the Django vocabulary. Now we want to create a Django app. So we have a project, we want to create an app. To create an app, you run the command python manage.py. You see now, so Python is just the Python command, and manage.py is the file we have in the current directory. So you see I am in app17 Django 4, and in this directory I have this manage.py file. So that means Python will execute this file, manage.py. Now, this file is set up in a way that it expects commands, and one of the commands is start app. Start app will create an app, so a Django app, the web app we want to create, which in our case is the application, the job application form. And then you want to give a name to that app. I do recommend to use an underscore if you have multiple words. So in my case, this will be job_application, and execute with enter. Once you execute, a new directory should be displayed here. So let's refresh. You can refresh if it doesn't show up. And yeah, so there we go, job application, job_application. So in the project root directory, we have job application, my site, and manage.py. Job application also has some configuration files, which are the configuration files of the app, not the configuration files of the project. So under my side, we have the configuration files of the project. And also manage.py is a configuration file of the project. But a project can have multiple apps, and each app will have its own directory. So now we have one app, job application. But perhaps you wanted to expand your site, your website. Perhaps you want to also add a blog section on your website, right? For that, you would create a new app using this command again, so python manage start app, and you'd say something like blog for the name, and then a new directory would be created here, named blog. We don't want to do that, so please don't execute that. And so a project may contain multiple apps. Now we are almost ready to run our Django app so that we can see the results on the web page. But just before we do that, now we want to modify one of the configuration files, the settings configuration file of our project. So go to my site, settings, double click that, and we want to register our app with the project. So you want to locate the installed app variable, which is equal to a list. So these are default apps of the project. You don't want to change them, but you want to add a new item to this list. So it's a list spanning across multiple lines. So in here, you want to press enter after the comma, and then create a string. I would use single quotes to be consistent with these other strings here. And here you want to type in the correct name of your app, job_application. It's also good to have a comma here in case you add more apps in the future. And once you have made that change, save the file with Ctrl S or Command S. Now close the file so that you don't do any unwanted changes. And then we're ready to run our app and see the output on the browser. Now, when we ran a Flask app, what we did is we went to the main.py file or app.py where our code was located, and then we run that file as we normally do with Python files. So just right click and execute that file. Now, running a Django app is a bit different. The process is a bit different. You want to use a particular command in your terminal. So please type in python manage.py followed by the run server command. So we are executing the same file which we executed during the creation of our job application app, but this time we don't use the start app command, we use the run server command. So execute that. and you should see this output. So you want to go to that link. So either click on that link or right click to open it somewhere, and you will see something like this. So that's the front page of your Django web app, of your Django website. So Django, initially it shows some default view here, but later when we add an index.html file for our app, and then we instruct Django that when the home page is visited, that index.html should show up here. So then this view will reflect the content of index.html. But for now, this is what we get. So with that, we have set up a Django project and a Django app successfully. So next is we need to add content to our app. So let's do that in the next videos. See you. Hey, welcome back. In the previous video, we set up a Django project and a Django app. So we've got the configuration files here in our PyCharm directory, and this is what we see so far on the front end. Now we want to develop the app. We want to add code to the app so that we can customize and build what we actually need, which is the job application form. How do we do that? Well, it's common with Django apps to start from the database. So a bottom-up approach, meaning that you start with a database, the backend, you code the Python files, and then you code the front end, which is the HTML part and CSS and Bootstrap. So a bottom-up approach starting from the database. So let's create a database model. You'll see, I'll explain as we go through this video, I'll explain what a model is. So let's stop the server first. So to stop the Django app, you want to go to the terminal where the Django app is running. So here, so put your cursor at the end and press Ctrl C. You also see it here. So on your keyboard, Ctrl C, and that will stop the server. Let's create a model. To create a database model, you want to go to job application, so the app directory, and go to models. Double click that. Models.py was created when we ran the python manage.py start app command. So all these files, including models.py, and so Django added these lines in here, but we need to delete this comment and create our model. So a model meaning a class which you can name whatever you like, but I do recommend to name it form, and this class should inherit from models.model. So this was imported here, models. And so this class is a child of the model class, right? So a model class now is specialized to specify the columns of the database table, right? So our database table will have several fields, several columns, as you know. So this will be the output at the end. So this is from the previous Flask app that we built in the previous sections, but the output will be the same. So we'll have a first name, input box here, last name, email, available start date, and current occupation. So when the user enters the data here, they fill in the data, they press submit. This data will be stored in a database table, right? So that table should have these columns: first name, last name, email, date, and occupation. So in here we are designing the database. That's what it is meant by model, the database model. Char field means a character field with a maximum length of 80. Make a break line there, and you want to duplicate this with Ctrl D or Command D and change it to last name, which is also the same type of field. So this field can accept 80 characters in total. And then we have the email. This can be an email field. So delete that. This is a specialized field to store email addresses. Then we have the date. This is also another specialized field, date field. And lastly, occupation. This is just another char field. Models.char field. Max underscore length is again 80. And there's one more thing we need to add here, and that is a magic str method, underscore str, self as an argument. I'll explain what this method does. Return f self dot first name self dot last name. What is str here? Well, let me quickly show you that to you in a Python console. So let's say we have a class foo, right? Now, if foo doesn't have a string method, when you create an instance of foo, like this foo with lowercase f, and you print that out, you print foo, you don't get any readable output. But if you have this class foo again, and you have a method str, and here you can define what this method will return. For example, it might return hello, I am foo, right? And then if you create an instance again of this new foo class and you print foo, then you'll get the string representation of that instance, right? So this magic method defines what should be printed when a print function is used, or in another case, like in this case, this should print out the name of the user, the surname, or it will display it in the admin interface when we create an admin interface later on. So Django will display this class, the instance of this class, in the form of Ardit Sulchev, for example, or another user. I hope that's clear. Right, so now we have a model. But how do we actually apply this model to the database, and where is the database? Well, the database should be somewhere in here, in the project directory, db.sqlite3, right? If you're curious to know what's inside that database, so if we have this table or not, I can actually show you that to you using the DB browser for SQLite program. You can install this program, you can search on Google, DB browser for SQLite if you're curious, or you can just watch me as I demonstrate to you what this database has inside. So I want to open the database using this button, and I want to locate the Django project. So there we go, that's db.sqlite3. Open it, and now we don't have any tables, right? But we are defining here a form table. So how comes that we don't have any tables here? Well, that's because we haven't applied any migrations, database migrations yet. So what we want to do next is to create migrations. I'll explain what migrations are. So we want to go to the terminal and type in Python manage.py make migrations. Don't execute it yet. So what does this command do now? Well, if you go to the job application directory, you'll find a migrations directory. If you don't have it, don't worry, it will be created when we run this command. So under this migrations directory, I see this init.py file, which is empty. Now, when I run this command, Python manage.py make migrations, some Python code will be added to this init method. I'll explain what that Python code is. First, let's run the command, but make sure that in settings, which is under my site, so my site is the project, in settings.py you have job application added already under installed apps, just like you see it here. So job application is the name of our app, job_application. So close settings and run this command, python manage.py make migrations. You should see this output in the command line. Now, if you go back to job application, migrations, you will see this empty file again, and also this other file, initial.py. So when we executed this command, python manage.py make migrations, what happens is that the form class is translated into Python code, some other code, right? Now, this code here is like the middleman between the form class and the DB database, right? db.sqlite3. So we still haven't touched the db.sqlite database. So if I go back to DB browser, we still see no tables here. So nothing has been changed in the database. To apply those migrations, we need to execute another command, python manage.py migrate. So press enter, and now if I go back to DB browser, I want to load the database again to make a refresh. So DB SQLite3 open. Now we see 12 tables. You see, one of those tables, so database tables, one of those is job application form. And if I expand this, we should see these fields, the columns that we created in models.py. So to wrap it up, what we did is we created this class, so the design of our database, the blueprint. Then we ran make migrations, python manage.py make migrations, that generated this file with Python code, and this Python code is then executed when we run python manage.py migrate, and that Python code alters the database. It adds all those tables. Now, what are these other tables? Well, these are the tables that belong to the project, not the app itself. So job application form is a table that belongs to the app, but these were created because we also have this project, the Django project. So these are like tables which contain configurations about the project. Of course, if I go to browse data and I select the job application form table, there are no entries here. But these columns, these rows will be populated with data when we create the front end, the web page where the user can enter the data, their entries. So one last thing is that if at a future point you want to add another field to this table, I don't recommend you do that now. So please don't do it now because you still don't have the proper skills to make such changes. But if later on you want to add a new field to your database table, for example, you could add a city field here in the form class, then you would have to apply python manage.py make migrations to create a new file here. So that would create a new .py file under the migrations folder. And then you'd have to run python manage.py migrate to apply those changes to the database table. Right, I hope that's clear. And yeah, that's about creating a database model and applying that model to the actual database. So thanks for following. See you in the next one. Hey, welcome back. In the previous video, we worked on the database model. So if we run the program, the app now with python manage.py run server, we should see this on our browser. Now, this is the home page. So how can we display a custom home page here? Well, we can do that using view functions and HTML. View functions are... let me bring you the Flask app we developed in the previous sections. So in our Flask app index, this index function was a view function. So the index function was executed when the home page was visited, right? And so the index function that then returned the index.html file so that the user can see the website on their browser. So Django View functions are similar. To define a Django View function, you want to locate your app directory, job application in our case, and then locate the views.py file, which was generated in the beginning when we executed the command python manage.py start app. So you want to delete that comment and start creating your views with define followed by the name of the function followed by a request argument. So that's a parameter that the function expects from Django. So when Django calls it, Django passes a request on the background, so you don't have to worry to call this function, right? The function will be called when the user visits the URL here, and then the function will return an HTML template. Now with Flask we use the render template function. With Django it's just render. So make sure that render is imported in here from django.shortcuts import render, and this expects now the name of the HTML file, which we haven't created yet. To create this file, let me show you something first. If you go to settings in your my site directory, settings.py, and you should be able to see the templates variable here, which defines a dirs key. So it's a list of dictionaries, and this dictionary has this dirs, and here you can specify directory names where you want to place your HTML files. But if you don't specify them, which I do recommend to do, so don't specify any name, just close this, don't change anything. So if you don't specify them, then Django assumes that they are inside a templates directory, which should be located inside your job application folder. So inside your app, so job application, templates, and inside templates you want to create an HTML file. So go to HTML file, name this index.html, and don't delete these. I'm adding this to Git, I'm using Git. Don't delete these lines, we'll use this as a template for now. So I want to show you a generic Django app first, and then we create that job application form. So in the body here, I'll just write hello, or maybe use some h1 tags to wrap this around, like that. So this is what we've got, right? An index function which returns the rendered index.html template. That's good so far, but we don't have a decorator here like we had with the Flask app, right? With the Flask app, we had this decorator which attached this URL, the homepage, to this function. But in Django, it doesn't work like that. In Django, there's another way to connect a function, a view function, to a URL, so that when the user visits that URL, this function is executed. To connect a function, a view function, to a URL, you should create, under job application, you should create a new urls.py file. Add it to Git if you're using Git. Inside here you want to import from Django.urls, import path, and also from .import views. So this is something from Django, from the library, right? And this here is the views.py file. We are importing this file as a module inside this file. So that works because views and urls.py are in the same directory under job application, right? So then you want to define a URL patterns variable. Be careful here because you should use the exact name as you're seeing here. So URL patterns without spaces, without underscores, because Django will look for this variable name here. So then this will be a list. I'll just split that to have multiple lines. and then you call that path function, which takes 3 arguments. This one would be like the subdirectory in the URL. Perhaps you want it like an about page and so on. But since this is the home page, you just leave it an empty string. And then you do views.index. So we imported views, this file, and this file has an index function. So basically we are saying here that the home page should be connected to this function. And then you want to give a name to this, which will be used later by Django. So you should give the same name as this function name, but as a string. So that's a string, that's not a string, right? You should be able to tell the difference here. So that's a list with one item for now. So the item is the call of the path function. Then there's one more thing we have to do regarding the URLs. You want to collapse this to close this directory, and then open the MySite directory, and inside MySites you'll find a urls.py file. So this was generated again by Django when we set up the project. Now these are the URLs of the project, right? The other urls.py file contains the URL patterns of the app. So our job application app could have one or more URLs, right? And then in here, so in this URL patterns list, you want to go after the comma, press enter, and add a new URL pattern. So this is again an empty string, and then you say include, and then you specify the name of your app, which is job_application.urls. So this comes as a string, and it points to the urls.py file of the job application app. So that URLs file, which contains the patterns of the app, and include is something we need to import. So just go here, django.urls import path, comma, include. With that, we can go to this page, reload, and sometimes you might get errors, and the errors will display something like this. To troubleshoot these errors, you should look at the exception location here, which tells you where in what file the error is occurring. So in my case, it's views.py, line 5, index. Index is the name of the function. So let's go to that line, views, line 5. So again, it's complaining that render is missing one required positional argument, template name. So render actually gets more than one argument. So the first argument should be request, this parameter. So that parameter goes as the first argument of this call, the render call, right? So this error, Django thinks that you specified index.html as the request parameter, and then you didn't specify the second parameter, so it thinks that the template name is missing as a second parameter. So please change that to this, request and index.html. Then go back to the page, reload, and this is what you should see if everything is working fine. So that is the hello h1 heading, which we served through our index.html file. So that's how you create a web page, a static web page with Django. Next in line is we want to add the form here, and then accept user data in the form, store those data in the database, send an email to the user, and then finally create an admin interface to view the data that has been submitted from the user. So let's do that in the next videos. Thanks a lot for this. See you later.